Hello and welcome. Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast in season 3 with Kyle Apps.
That's repeat.
Hello and welcome to Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. I'm your host Ben Wellman here in season 3 with Kyle Apps. The
Three-peat. We're back, baby.
Mad Dog, we are in the season 3, which is Game Changer. We're changing the game in season 3. We're in 2025. We are going to thrive. Why have we called it Game Changer this season?
Well, okay, seriously. I mean, I know we're speaking to coaches and people doing sports ministry, and I think that's big because each coach has a role to play in the child's life, right? Whether it's technical or physical or psychological or spiritual. So I think this season we're going to look at different boxes of our Four Corner Plus. So I think this will be a great way to apply what Sports Friends is to a lot of what other people are doing.
That's right. So we're going to talk about our game-changing training piece in Sports Friends, which is called the Four Corner Plus, right? Every episode, we're going to have a game-changing guest who's going to dive into one of these boxes or maybe the plus in the middle. And it's game-changing because we believe that God is the ultimate game changer. He's the one that's given us the victory. That means we can say we've already won. And then we're going to have guests in who are in their own lane, who are changing the game. And they're going to give us some game-changing advice for coaches or for whatever ministry or part of life you're in. They're maybe going to sprinkle some gold dust, which hopefully
a dose of gold.
They're going to hopefully sprinkle some gold dust, which will help you change the game in the lane that you're in. That's our hope, right, Mad Dog? And this week we're talking about a very important topic. We're diving at the psychological corner. We're talking about mental health and mental well-being. Huge topic, right?
It is. And if I'm okay, I'm a little tired. I had a long weekend with the youth. It was a youth retreat. That age 14 to 17 is they're young, they're growing up. But they could stay up later than I can. They can do better than I can on a little sleep. So I've got coffee. I'm good. So I'm excited to hear about this. So maybe my well-being will be changed as well. Getting more rest, obviously. So if you need to slap me with the stick, Ben, go ahead. I'm here for you. Wake me up.
Well, you mentioned two things there, coffee and rest. That's something that might be important for you with your mental well-being. I know for myself, I know there's certain things that I know I need to do. I need to go and exercise. I go on a daily walk with the dog.
With me? That's great.
And then with my dog, not the Mad Dog, but in nature. You live in a nice part of the world where you go and play golf, which is good for your mental well-being, right? Are there other things that you do for your mental well-being, Mad Dog?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a lot. Just physically getting moving. For me, if I don't play basketball 2 or 3 times a week, if I'm not pushing or getting pushed, if I'm not motivating myself to run up and down the court, whatever, interact with other people, you'll see a dip in my well-being.
There's so many things that I can imagine both of us do, but there's no doubt that we're in a mental health crisis. I think the pressure that we're under from the constant, social media world that we're in, just in general, the overload that we're in, overstimulated. I think for young people now, it's such a hard place to live in because of this crippling world that's created so much anxiety and so much stuff as well. And of course, all the things that trauma brings as well around that as well. So we're going to need an expert, right, who's going to help us with our mental well-being. Who are we bringing in this week? Who's going to help us navigate this mental health crisis?
Is it Heather Lewis?
She's a brilliant person, brilliant human being, and she wants to help others. And she's here to share her knowledge and insight and wisdom with the Already Won listeners. Incredible, Mad Dog. Incredible.
It is going to be great. So let's get her in here. I think she's in the studio. All right, let's bring her in.
All right, then without further ado, let's welcome this week's guest to the podcast, Heather Lewis. Heather, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So good to have you on. Now, Kyle's a little bit worse for wear. Kyle, what were you doing last few days?
Well, I was on a youth retreat. We'd go for 3 days, 2 nights with high school kids at secondary school, from the about 15 to 17-year-olds. So they're young, but they're trying to think their way in the world. And there were some pranks happening. We have a no prank policy, but occasionally something's happened. There was one where beds were removed off bunk beds. They ended up in the shower, in the bathroom. Something with a pickle jar that was full with pickles and juice. So that's all I'm going to say. We tried to stop it. We did our best. We handled it, but I'm sure, Heather, you've got stories.
Yeah, I was a young person myself at those camps and then became a youth worker. And I was actually at summer camp a couple of years ago, rolling my eyes, getting mad. And then this lady who was my youth worker was like, do you not remember the chaos that you caused me when you were a young person? I was like, what? She's like, don't you remember unhitching the leader's caravan and moving it into the middle of the cricket pavilion? And I was like, no, I do not remember. I think my favourite is bad, isn't it? But my favourite is the classic cling film, you know, that plastic wrap over the toilet seat in the boys' toilets. So you have to find a male ally to go in there for you.
Well, a great icebreaker on there. Well, we're going from pranks to game changers and game changing moments. That's the theme for season 3. We're talking about game changer. First question, Head, is tell us about why God is the ultimate game changer.
Yeah, it's such a great question. The simple answer is because he made me, he knows me, and he brings me life. Like he brings me life here now in all of its fullness, but also that eternal hope. Because he saved me.
That's great. What about when did God change your life? When did you realize God's calling and purpose for your life?
Yeah, I'm really thankful that I grew up with parents who love Jesus. And so going along to church every week, being part of church community. But when I was 9 years old, I remember as a family that we were away at like a Christian Easter event and hearing the story of Jesus being the Good Shepherd. And how he was the one that wanted to care for us and love us and save us and forgive us. And then I remember kind of taking this little children's booklet with that story and some questions, and then praying with my dad after that kind of teaching and becoming a Christian that night when I was 9 years old. I think maybe like a lot of people who've grown up maybe going to church. When I was a teenager, I had some great moments of really growing in my faith, but moments of like playing a game and knowing what to say, knowing what to do, ticking a box. And then when I was 18, I was helping at this kind of church event with kids, and over a summer, I was like, do I actually believe this stuff? Or have I been brainwashed into this by my parents? And really grappling with it and asking some questions and praying. And I kind of liken this to, bear with me on the analogy, but like a dog lead. So, you know, like when you know and love Jesus, he's always got you. He's never letting you go. But God has the end of that, and I'd wandered away. And he was never, ever going to let me go. But in his kindness, you know, showing me, this is the evidence. This is who I am. There is real plausible evidence, and in my own life as well as in history, to show that this is true. And and thankfully then I really kind of thought, right, this is my faith, it's not my parents. I'm living this for me because of what Jesus has done.
So good. I once heard someone say God has no grandchildren, he only has children, and you became that, you know, child of God for yourself. So love that. Got to get a cheesy quote in there, Carl, nice and early, right? But we're talking about you being a game changer in your lane right now, and this is a huge topic. Mental health, mental well-being and stuff. So tell us, what does it look like for you now being a game changer in the work that you're in now?
Yeah, sure. So I have the joy of doing a variety of different things, and the thing that I'm kind of really, really passionate about and have been probably most of my adult life is investing in people where they might have barriers to good mental health. And so that might be something we call adverse childhood experiences, so things that they have been through which are just really tough, like things maybe in the home or in the community. And so I've, you know, seen that through stuff that I've done kind of in foster care capacities, but also then through like the community that I've lived in and been a part of, which is inner city, and just lots of kind of vulnerability factors. And I think the more then that I've grown and trained and developed and learned, as well as then walked alongside people, I've just seen the importance of advocating for people who have barriers to good mental health. And the things that we know that are good for your mental health are community, you know, having access to nature, sport and physical activity and movement, people you can talk to, who you can trust, and all of those things are good for your mental health. And so for me, as a game changer, I think being able to do research and to evidence that, to show the need for it, that it really does matter, but then also offering some kind of resources is important too. And I just have the joy of doing that in the community in the way that I volunteer, as well as then through to like elite sport and consultancy stuff with looking at like what does it look like to support people in contexts like Rugby World Cup, where you'd think actually there's so much there for people to support themselves, but sometimes when you're an elite athlete, you don't have the ability to speak up about your vulnerabilities. So if I can stand in there and do some research and advocate for that, I think that's awesome. And there's a verse in Proverbs 31:8, I think, that says, "Speak up for those who have no voice," and around tackling injustice. So I think for me, it all comes back to whether that's like playing basketball with a 13-year-old for whom English is their second language, and they might have been trafficked, so exploited, they've arrived in the UK without family, through to how can I advocate for and speak up for an athlete who's fearful about their poor mental health because they're worried about their selection. That's always like a kind of be a game changer, in that space.
I mean, it's not just your job, your calling, but it's your whole life. It's evident from what you're saying, and maybe that's leads into the question: is what is well-being? Where does it start, and when does it start? I mean, as adults now, we look back at ourselves. We have sports athletes that we've judged in the '90s from these eyes today. So, like, if you could look back, or in your own personal life, or as you're looking at youth today, when does it start and where?
Yeah, I think that we're shifting our perceptions on this, but it's still not there. But we often talk about like we have physical health and we have mental health, and they're two separate things, but actually they overlap. We know, from a faith perspective that God made us to be physical beings, but emotional beings with brains and feelings. And that's what I also love in the work that I do. I'm like, oh, the Bible talks about this. Like the Psalms are full of that kind of emotional stuff, but also Jesus, like the way that he talks and deals with emotions in people. But yeah, I think the other thing as well is that sometimes we can talk about, I was going about my life and then I had mental health. No, we always had mental health, but it was that actually we might be struggling with poor mental health now. So we've always had that our emotions, our feelings, but we may have stages in life where we have poor mental health, and it's on a spectrum. It can change, it can vary for people. And then what does it look like in relation to children and young people and adults? Well, if we can provide those protective factors for people from a young age, having that trusted adult that they can have in their life, whether that's their parent, their guardian, or sometimes when that isn't the case, it's often a sports coach actually that can be the trusted, safe person that consistently sees that child or young person every week, a couple of times a week, and builds that rapport with them through play, through listening, through caring for them. That can be such a good protective factor to support mental health and well-being.
Well, that's great, because we train coaches to walk alongside young people. So that's so good to hear that, a trusted coach who does that is really good for young people's mental health. Now, you mentioned some things that are good for your mental health. So let's dig into that a bit more and explore it. So I wrote down, you said community, nature, sport, movement. Now, within Sports Friends, we train coaches. We've got a new level 2 training program that came out in 2024, and we call it the 4 Corner Plus. So one corner, it's about how a coach can help a young person develop technically, physically, psychologically, socially, and then in the middle, spiritually. And we've combined Luke 2:52, the verse that says Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, favor with man, favor with God, with the FA4 corner model. Now, you just mentioned those things, what things are good for our mental health. So I wonder if you could dig into that a little bit more and link it to the 4 Corner Plus. So I guess movement is in the physical corner. You've got, community being the social side of things. Can you just talk a little bit about some of those things that are good for our mental well-being and link it to those 4 corners if you can?
Yeah, definitely. So technical, let's take that. So when we're curious and we learn something new, like we add to our knowledge and we kind of broaden our minds more, that's good for our mental health. Okay. So even like on a simplistic level, if you can in football learn a new drill, that's probably gonna support good mental health, because it's broadening it and expanding and your mind. And then we celebrate, don't we, when we like achieve that new drill, we achieve that skill. That's good for us too. And we want to kind of help people to overcome those challenges and persevere and have resilience too in sport, because you don't learn a skill straight away, you don't nail it. You're not going to be like the perfect player all the time. So that technical, but also the way we do technical. So just thinking as a coach, like, how do I communicate that clearly? How do I think about this child who maybe their listening skills aren't that brilliant? So how do I visually show them the skills? So thinking about people's learning styles, is it that I want to draw on a whiteboard if I have the luxury of a whiteboard? Is it that I display it to them and we go through it step by step? Is it that actually all I need to say is a sentence with this particular person and they're going to get it? So the more we can be aware of how God has made people and wired them, the better we can be at our communication too. So that's technical, and a little bit of an add on there, I guess, for coaches to think about how they can do that well. And then physical, well, sport, football, movement. And I guess just there's so much science behind that in and around endorphins and how good that is for our bodies. But I think the more we can involve play in that too, like that laughter, that creative, that fun element, not just always performance, is really important. So a lot of elite athletes, you talk to them, okay, well, if my elite sport is soccer, that's my performance, that's my job. Actually, the thing that I really love doing for my movement, it might be like pickleball is all the rage at the moment, or golf, or going for a run, or, you know, that's mega important. And then I guess that social aspect of creating a culture and a community in and around a team. And I think from a coaching point of view, ensuring that that's a safe space where people feel really welcome and cared for and loved. And that can start even before the session starts with your planning. Like, are you ready for when they turn up? Can you look them in the eye and smile? Can you get to know names? I struggle with names so much, so stickers are your best friends there. But creating that safe social space, which enables people to flourish, because they might be really nervous coming in. They might not have had great experiences in sport before. There can be all kinds of barriers. So yeah, a safe social space. And finally, that psychological aspect, I guess, just being prepared to listen well to people and to support them and notice when they might be a bit off, and know like what's in my lane as a coach and actually what's beyond my lane. Like, where can I signpost to professionals? Where can I help them to access healthcare? If that is a luxury you have in your contacts, which I know that that's not the case in all of the areas that you work.
Lots of good stuff there. I'm taking notes frantically here. Yeah.
All I heard was golf, Ben. She said golf.
Golf is good.
I mean, a lot of what you're saying, a lot of what we want as well, is intentionality and being intentional about everything, from each of the corners and the plus. You know, even as we say, the 4-corner plus is based on our Luke 2:52, Jesus grew in wisdom, faith, and favor with God, favor with man. So it's like this physical, social, spiritual, everything, and mental. And we want to have that, but also even the Great Commission. So as Christians, as we go out and make disciples, the command is go. As you're going to the office, as you're going to the field, as you're going shopping, wherever you're going, to make disciples. So how does your Christian faith impact your work?
Yeah, I think for me as a Christian, knowing that God made me and that we're made in his image, means that we have tremendous value and worth, means that we have purpose and we're different and we have gifts and skills. And the more I the more I live in this world, the more research I do, the more I see that isn't the case, especially in our systems. Like, our systems can be really broken, that people aren't given the value, the worth, the care, the things they need in order to thrive physically and mentally. And so therefore, I guess just that being compelled to see that and do what I can about it. And sometimes it means like just saying, Lord, have mercy, and just saying my prayers, because the issues are too big. but actually what is it within my lane that I can do? And that was a lesson that I've really learned over the last 6 or 7 years, is I think because of growing up in sport and being a bit of a, like, let's see what we can do and fix this, I'd almost be like, yeah, I can do that. If you carry on that trajectory, this is going to happen. And I feel like I need to speak up and do something about everything. And no, actually, I just got to stay in my lane and do the thing that God's called me to do. And it might be that someone's in the lane next to me and I can cheerlead them and encourage them, but it's not my lane to delve into, in the same way as, like if you run 100 meters and your toe goes into the lane of the other, like, you're out. You cannot, you've got to stay in your lane. And I think God's really shown me that, especially through stories in the Bible and the Old Testament, of him being like, yeah, that situation looked awful, but if I'd have done this and this that on a human level would have made sense, it would have led to, like, my whole Israelite people not being freed, or it would have led to this victory not happening or that happening. And he knows more than I do. So I think, in conclusion, to what I'm trying to say is just knowing, like, people have value and worth. I've got a skill set that he's given me. What is my role that I can play in advocating for that and helping, and what isn't my role? And I think the clearer I am on that, the better.
Really good. Got that. Stay in your lane. Loud and clear. Heard. Loud and clear. Very good.
Taking notes.
Yeah, which is good. Now, obviously, a lot of our coaches, what we train at, we would say, like, grassroots level, so there's some really good practical things that you've said there around that, what we can do to help young people's mental health and our own mental health as coaches. And but in terms of what you've done your masters, you've done a lot of research as well in this elite world of sport. And I'm just interested a little bit around, if you could share a little bit around just your findings around that, because I think the world of elite sport is an interesting place. Like, as in, your whole identities around your performance. There's so much pressure. Like you mentioned before, the importance of play and having fun. But when your job is actually to move and to do that, and you're judged on that, it must be a hard place. So just wonder if you could summarize a little bit around that research that you did. What did you find out just from that mental well-being kind of perspective?
So as part of my masters, I carried out research into the mental health of players and, like, support staff, backroom staff, particularly in a Rugby World Cup context. So in the States, rugby is growing. You're going to be hosting the men's and the women's rugby. I'm really excited for that. And just kind of ask some really simple questions, like, what supports your mental health? What are vulnerabilities in that context? What advice would you give? And what became so clear to me, and what I wanted to become clear, was the voice of lived experience, right? Because there's a person called Weissensteiner who talks about the fact that the athlete's voice is often not heard, which is ironic given that they are the expert in their own lived experience when it comes to well-being. And so I wanted to hear the athlete's voice, like, so that that could be captured, but then also it could be passed on. And so what really emerged was the power of that. So a player saying, you could be the best sports psychologist in the world, but if you haven't experienced what it's like to be an international rugby player, we're not going to listen to what you're saying. Now, that's not the case for everybody, but there was this real need for just supporting people with their mental health, knowing what it's like to be in that super unique environment. That doesn't dismiss the other roles, but there's a real need there for that. And then the other kind of thing that emerged, there was many things, but the other thing that really emerged was around, like, the fact that your performance, your identity can be wrapped up in that. And then you can work so hard because you have to be the best in the world at what you do. But then an injury, deselection, all kinds of stuff can take that from you. And suddenly, I had the privilege of talking to people who'd done 2 months of pre-competition camp and then weren't selected to go. And so you have to go back home. And many of those people that you were in camp with day on day are then on TV competing on the global stage, and you're having to watch in. So what can be done proactively to support that? And they had some real gold dust about that. What can be done in the moment to help? And it's not just to say, yeah, that's the reality of sport, move on. that, you know, that is the reality. It can happen. But to give people time to grieve even about that and to have empathy and to walk with them, yeah, it's really powerful. So that's just kind of that two things there, the power of lived experience, and then, yeah, that kind of identity and performance bit, really.
Any game-changing advice for coaches? As you know, we're working in Africa and Asia and South America and even in UK and North America. So any general or any specific game-changing advice for coaches?
Yeah, I think communication is absolutely key. Like, communication, having clarity in who you are, what your role is, what kit you need at that session, how long the session's going to be, what language do your participants speak in, how can you communicate the best with them. All of that stuff is super important, because it helps people to know that they're seen, they're valued, and to have a sense of safety about what this next hour is going to look like. You know, what is expected of me in that situation. So I think communication's massive. And if it's all right, can I use the whiteboard and draw something?
Oh, here we go.
Please.
This wasn't planned, but
Please.
it's just coming to me now. Okay, so say we've got like this iceberg, right? And under the waterline here, there's all kinds of stuff going on in people's lives, right? So it could be that they've got someone really unwell at home, or they're living in a state where they just don't have access to the resources that they need. That morning they could have heard some bad news, or they've got some kind of challenges with their academics that they're trying to, you know, navigate all of that stuff. But when you're the coach, you don't have the luxury of knowing all of this stuff, right? You come into your session and all you see is the tip of the iceberg, is the behaviour, is what's going on in front of you. Does that make sense? So it could be that they arrive late to the session because of this stuff that's going on that you don't know about. It could be that they come across as really rude or withdrawn or stressed. And you might just think, come on, you've got to be positive. We're playing football, we're playing soccer. And actually there's all of this stuff going on underneath. And so I think that if as a coach, you can just stop and remember that. Like, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what is going on to cause this behaviour, or I wonder if there could be some things happening for them. That's really powerful, just stopping and wondering. And then from our faith perspective, knowing that God knows. God does see and know and care. And where possible, then just checking in and saying, how are you doing? And creating an environment where we can get to know some of those things where appropriate. So communication, and then secondly, just acknowledging there's stuff going on for people, and cultivating curiosity and wondering, and not being judgmental about that. And of course, when we think about Jesus, like I think about church yesterday, we were looking at the woman at the well, and Jesus asked that question, doesn't he, about the woman's husband, and he knows about her husband. She's not mentioned it because he's God and he knows. And so you're not a mind reader, I'm not a mind reader, coaches aren't, but we have a God who does see and know and care. And so we can also, you know, come to him about that stuff as well.
From the whole conversation, you said things like, you know, time and empathy and stuff. And for us, with sports friends, our coaches, they spend not just time on the field, but off the field, you know, whether it be traveling to games or afterwards, they spend time, you know, with families, and they even, you know, try and read God's word with them. And just like you say, ask those questions and be curious about it, and try and dig under that iceberg after that safe environment's being created and stuff. And I think that's really, really important for someone to understand. You mentioned the elite world, but for someone to know kind of and understand what you've been through. And I think about a year ago, I went through quite a serious trauma. I won't go into too much detail, but I nearly lost someone very close to me in front of my eyes. And it was in that time I needed people who knew and had the capacity to listen, and then to basically walk alongside and not judge, and basically just be there and ask those questions and offer that support. I think is a really important thing. So you've given us loads of different practical tips. I would love to even dig in a bit more about the resource and stuff. But you mentioned things like support group, you know, and I'd imagine that like almost taking a personal approach for every person. I think myself, I know I need to exercise. I know I need to go to the gym. I know I need to be around people. Otherwise, I go crazy in front of my wife and stuff. So it's like everyone has a personal thing. I wonder who is like the biggest human game changer for you in terms of like someone who supports you, or what's your like own kind of personal way that you look after your own mental well-being. Just to finish off with, personal biggest human game changer?
That's such a great question. I'm going to be really cheeky and take two. So I guess I have a peer that is walking alongside me in a very kind of similar age, and and so she was actually an elite athlete herself. She came to know Jesus later on in life. And so we look at each other's stories and she's like, oh, I wish I'd have grown up in the church like you. And I knew like Bible stories and stuff. And I look at her and go, I wish I had the rapid transformation you had and the evidence of change. And we ask each other the hard questions, those really tough questions, honest questions, and that's really important. And we've been through some really hard, sad, life-changing times together, as well as the joyful and celebratory times. And then I also have someone that's much further ahead in their faith than me, older than me, wiser than me, my mentor. And for me, because I'm single, so I need to process a lot of stuff on my own. This amazing woman, Elaine, she keeps tabs on where I am, what I'm doing, what's going on in my life, so that she can speak into that, and she can say to me, okay, yeah, but you've got this deadline coming up, you've got this, and we need to pray together about this, and we need to work it through. So I think both of them are absolute game changers. Elaine, because I'm like, oh my word, she's living for Jesus, she's further ahead of me in her race. Like, if I can be like her, wow, like if I could be 10% like her, amazing. And then a friend that walks alongside me that asks me has permission to ask those tough questions. We cry together, celebrate together. Both of those people are mega important for me.
So good. So pleased you used to. So good. So last thing there. Where can people with your work you're doing, your consultancy stuff, how can people get in touch with you? Or what about signposting people to some things that you maybe want to signpost people to?
Good question. Like LinkedIn, I guess. So Heather Lewis, and you can find me on there, and I'm based in the UK. That there, my Instagram, I'm just gonna have to just double check because it's not on the tip of my tongue. But it's @HLewis_ mental health and sport. Nice and catchy, but it says what I'm doing. And then I think resources wise, I think that there are some brilliant kind of people out there doing work in the sport for development space, and I'll send you some articles, some links if you want to kind of attach them to this rather than me reel them off.
Brilliant. Show notes. Kyle will do that. Won't you, Kyle? Put them in the show notes. I just love how I've obviously known you for over 10 years now, and just how you're able to step into this and all your experiences, the youth work and everything else that you've done in your life. To do that, I just feel like you're living out your passion calling and I always say, if you can explain something simply enough, then you really understand it. And people who are experts in their field are able to explain things simply, and you've really helped us explain things simply in a huge area, which we could continue to talk about a lot more as well. So thank you for your time, thank you for expertise, and thank you for that iceberg on the whiteboard. I tell you, some gold dust there.
Gold dust. Are we going with gold dust? Is that what's going to be?
It was gold dust was raining down, right? You enjoy it?
I did. It was good. It was good. I loved it. She brought. I mean, I think you prompted her. I mean, maybe you spent some time, giving her these gold dust and stuff. But I think it was great. No, it was really good stuff.
Yeah, I spoke about one of the verses that you love as well, right? Proverbs 31.
Yeah, Proverbs 31:8. I mean, it talks about speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, the rights of all those who are destitute, and it's not necessarily speaking over them or just for them. Like, hey, I got this, but it's that they're speaking up. So there's things that we do as coaches that sometimes we need to speak to their pastors, their parents, because those youth have empowered us with some things. Maybe it's not divulging all secrets, but it's at least speaking for them, advocating for them, because they may not have a voice, and you are in the right or appropriate place. So it's a big thing as coach. There's a lot of power that you have, and using it wisely is big.
Yeah, I mean, she talked about just the coach being the consistent person who walks alongside young people, creating a safe environment, creating a fun environment, and then all these different tips that she spoke about. I loved, this in 2024, we've implemented the 4 corner plus, right? And Heather spoke about each corner how and give us some tips about kind of mental well-being for young people. I personally just took away, things like being in community, being part of a team,
Yeah.
Even like going outside, in nature is good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in movement, getting outside, walking. Like we're so sedentary. We sit behind desk in the West a lot of the time and different things. And around the world as well, we need to move and be around people as well. We're made to be in relationship as well. So loads of good things as well. If I could drop in some Wellman weekly words, you may often it's always said, it's okay to not be okay. But here's a little thing. Not every day is good, but there's some good in every day. How about that, Mad Dog? Hey, not every day is good.
This guy.
Good in every day. Got to look for the good. Got to look for the good. Yeah, some really good stuff for her there. And look, she's got some really good resources as well, and spoke about some really good stuff as well. Good question to ask, I think, for all of us is what is good for you for your own mental well-being. And I think it's a personal thing. Everyone will be different, but also who is your kind of support network, right? I think that's another good question to ask. For a player, it might be your coach. If you're a coach, who's your support network? Is it, if you are part of a CCSM, your local church pastor or people who are praying for you, who is your support network? It might be like Heather, a close friend, or it might be a mentor, someone a little bit older and wiser who can speak into your life as well. I thought that was really good from Heather as well, right?
That's great. And I think that's important. We don't always have it. We sometimes think we're isolated or alone, or our coordinators are not really helping the coaches or whatever you want to say. But yeah, it's good to share the wealth, as it were.
Yeah, so good. Well, we're sharing, I tell you what, we're sharing the wealth. We're sharing the gold dust. That gold dust was all over Heather's whiteboard. Incredible stuff. Season 3, we're in 2025. We are going to thrive thanks to this gold dust, right?
Four Corner Plus, baby. Coaches. Psychological corner.
There you go. Loved it. We're looking forward to diving into more corners, right, Mad Dog? Might dive into the technical corner, physical corner, social corner, or maybe the spiritual plus as well in future episodes as well. What we got to do though?
Well, season 1, season 2, we told our friends, told our friends' friends, told our parents and our parents' friends. We just got to tell everyone. You've already won.